What's up guys, welcome to this review of Star Wars Queen's Hope by EK Johnston, the third in the trilogy focusing on Padme Amidala, and sadly the worst in the trilogy by quite a margin. We'll get into why that is in just a bit, but let's just get into what this is all about. Padme Amidala, right at the end of Star Wars Episode 2 Attack of the Clones, she marries Anakin Skywalker. That's right where this book kicks off. The first few chapters are focusing on the wedding and the build up to it. Then Padme gets sent on a secret mission. Meanwhile, Sabe, her handmaiden, or once upon a time handmaiden, who is now living on Tatooine trying to do some good there and free the slaves and so on and so forth, gets called back to Coruscant to fill in for Padme while she's off on her secret mission. That's what this is all about. Not much more to it than that. There's a couple of other little bits and bobs here and there, but nothing major. So, like I said, this is the worst in the trilogy, but does that make it a bad book? Yeah, kind of. So, the problem is that this book is very short, very fast paced, and very to the point. This book, I think, does the criminal thing about any book or any piece of writing or art form that's telling a story is that it tells its story rather than shows or conveys its story. You always go for show, don't tell, and this book doesn't do that, at least not a lot. And I think because it is just summing everything up in sentences and paragraphs rather than highlighting it, like rather than saying a character looks a certain way, a character's like frowning to show their annoyance or whatever, it actually just says this character's annoyed. So that really helps speed things up, it really helps shorten things out, but it's not good. It doesn't feel like you're actually part of this world, it doesn't help heighten the immersion into this book at all. It just makes the book shorter and to the point. And maybe that's something you like. It could just be a subjective thing here. Yeah, the first third is all about the wedding between Padme and Anakin and them trying to deal with that. And it's not until about halfway through the book that Padme actually goes on the main quest of this book, her main mission, and it takes a long time to get going, and there's still a lot of unanswered elements about that, a little vagueness and under-explained elements about it all. I will say that once that part kicks off, that is the best part of the book. The final third of this book is actually quite good compared to what came before it. And again, it's not that a lot of this stuff is bad, it's just it doesn't feel like there's been a lot of thought into it, it doesn't feel like there's a lot of depth, it doesn't feel like it's all that important or relevant to the larger Star Wars canon. And we'll get into that in a minute, we'll get into it. Padme's main mission. She is sent off on a secret mission to investigate a hint given to them by some sort of confidant that there's some shady stuff going on with various corporate profiting from the war on both sides. So she goes out to see about that. It becomes relevant later on why her and why it's being reached out to her and her group of Bail and stuff. But the problem is that this story, this mission that she goes on, is very anticlimactic. Again, it takes a long time, and then all of a sudden it cuts very short to the point where it doesn't even feel like it's got an end. It kind of stops. We get an answer, and then yeah, we're done. But there's no real resolution. We find out who it is that's sending this information and what's going on, but there's nothing after that. Perhaps they're setting up for a sequel. But the problem is, without going into spoilers, the thing they're setting up for cannot possibly happen, because this is set before Star Wars The Clone Wars, and events and people in Star Wars The Clone Wars that directly contradict what this book is hinting at and setting up. So whatever happens between this book and Star Wars The Clone Wars is done and dusted and is completely pointless and irrelevant. So why set that up in the first place? But in the later half of the book there is some action and excitement going in there, because it does start to overlap with the events of the Clone Wars, and I'm on about just the Clone Wars in general, not the... We do see some action moments there, we see some little battles and skirmishes there with Padme getting involved and Anakin. That adds a little bit of excitement to things. But overall, this is a much more character-focused book than a story or event-driven book, and that's kind of a... But the problem is, I don't think this book has a lot of stuff to say about the characters, at least not that we've already seen or heard from. We know about the secret of Anakin, his Star Wars: The Clone Wars, so we're just delving into that again here. We know that Padme is trying to do good and move on with her life and Senate, and what we've already seen that in the films, so why is it doing it again here? We know the main thing about this book that I think actually does resonate is the stuff with Sabi. Sabi leaving town, leaving her own job and arguable to go and do one last mission for Padme. That's like the main interesting bit of this book, I think, in that it really gives Sabi something to contend with, some conflict there. And because at the end of the day, she's not Padme's handmaiden, but as soon as Padme comes calling, she rushes off to help her. Why does she do that? Well, the book kind of addresses that, and Sabi as well is thinking about that all the way through, and that's really cool. And it comes to a very sitting down and having a heart-to-heart about what's next for them both, and it's really... Again, it's dealing with Anakin and Padme's relationship. Well, Abby ends up on Coruscant and Anakin walks in. So it's really cool to see Sabi and Anakin meet each other and talk to each other. Of course, they've met each other before in episode 1, The Phantom Menace, but their moment of awkwardness of Anakin realizing that it's not Padme and wondering what the hell's going on, really cool scene. I really like that interaction. Anakin being on the aggressive side, Sabi being on the defensive side, sticking up for herself as well. And they very quickly realize what they mean to Padme, and they kind of sort of bond while also butting heads at the same time. It's a really cool scene. But it's worth saying that this is filled with romance. Now, Star Wars hasn't always done romance very well, particularly in the prequels. Sadly, this is right alongside Star Wars Episode 2 in terms of the cringy romantic stuff, I would say. The romance stuff in this is not good at all. It's actually really boring and it kind of drags things out a bit, and really cringy dialogue in there, akin to Star Wars Episode 2 Attack of the Clones. So yeah, maybe that's deliberate, maybe that's EK Johnston trying to have a dig at George Lucas or whatever, but yeah. They could have done a better job of the romance, or they could have not the romance stuff. On the plus side though, EK Johnston does a really good job at capturing the voices of these characters. Anakin Skywalker speaks and acts like you would expect Anakin Skywalker to act. Padme speaks and acts like Padme. And of course, she's wrote 2 of her books in the series so far, so she knows these characters in and out. She really does a good job at delving into what's going on in their mind and how they speak and how they would act and react to certain things. So, good job there. The problem with some of the characters though is the handmaidens. We do see a lot of the other handmaidens and what they're getting on with in their life. But the problem is, outside of Sabi, who is a recognizable actress in the Star Wars universe because it's Keira Knightley, all the other handmaidens kind of just blur into one, and they're just kind of names, and their faces kind of mesh together, and it's hard to remember, like, right, this one's the politician, this one's off doing that, this one's got an interest in music, but it's like, right, which one am I actually seeing right now? Which one? And the next chapter, so which one's this? It's hard to keep track of them all, and it's hard to figure out which at times. And the book doesn't do a very good job at reminding you which is which. So I kind of feel like it goes straight from the book into this one in order to get a full understanding of who these characters are, unless you've just got a super memory and you know that off the top of your head. And it's a shame that a lot of this book does focus on these other handmaidens who aren't as interesting as Sabi or Padme, and again, who are hard to recognize in comparison to those characters. But overall, Star Wars Queen's Hope feels rushed, it feels unfinished, it feels like maybe publishers or Lucasfilm or whatever went to EK Johnston and said, hey, you've done 2 good books so far, we want more of that, do another one. And she was like, well, okay, I guess. And then she just kind of thought of something off the top of her head maybe. There's not a lot of depth here, there's not a lot of detail here. The story, like I said, just kind of stops. There is some emotional payoff, there is character payoff, but the actual main plot of the story, what the characters are doing and why they're doing it, is really lacking. So because it's also so short, and because it does tell us a lot of things rather than show us a lot of things, I do get the sense that there was some time constraint here. I do get the sense that EK Johnston either didn't want to write this book or was very limited and had to just do whatever she could to get this book out on time or whatever. Because the book was delayed. The book was delayed from next year to this year. So why was that? I don't know. Was that COVID or the pandemic or whatever? Who knows? Maybe that's the excuse they're given, but there's a lot going on here. The page length, the way it's written, and the content and the lack of content in this book that makes me wonder that there's actually something much more darker and sinister going on, but maybe not intentionally. But on the plus side of all that, EK Johnston, she does very clearly care about Padme and Sabe. She knows those characters in and out. She even knows Anakin Skywalker very well as well. So it does make me wonder that maybe this wasn't her choice. Maybe she didn't want to write this book. But again, I don't know. It's also worth saying that a recent comic book entry, Star Wars Darth Vader, has sort of followed up on the events of this book trilogy with the Handmaidens and Sabe and certain other characters. So maybe her hands were tied a bit. Maybe there wasn't so much she could do with these characters because she now has tied into the work of a writer from that comic book, which is set after The Empire Strikes Back. So yeah, maybe that's kind of affected what this book could have been. But overall, I think there's some to be had in this book in small bursts. The scene between Sabe and Anakin is really good and thrilling and cool, very soap opera-ish. The scene between Sabe and Padme towards the end of the book is very emotional and does a good job at giving the whole book an emotional payoff and send-off. It's just a shame about the story. The themes and the messages of the story are a little on the nose. There's elements about love and romance and moving on with one's life, which, again, they're on the nose, but there, she hits them and they send a decent message out there. But again, there just needs to be a bit more depth in here. And yeah, the book just isn't that captivating at times. And it takes a long time to get going, which is a problem when the book is very short. Overall though, Star Wars Queen's Hope, not one. Otherwise, check out my channel for more content like this if you like this review. I was not a huge fan of this book, but it's not